consistently attract soulmate clients, begin showing up on brand, monetizing on your calling. Welcome all spiritual coaches, leaders, healers, light workers, and practitioners to a show that turns you on in your business and amplifies your magnetism. I'm host, catalyst, and spiritual business coach Rosalind Fung, and I'm here to journey with you into the juicy and help you discover where the real gaps are. Ignite your mindset and soul with strategies and systems as each episode takes you to the sweet spot that activates your soulgasmic business. Enjoy this light language activation as we begin to magnetize and monetize. Hello, loves. Welcome to another incredible episode. This is for you if you've been wanting to start a new podcast and or you have a podcast and you want to grow your audience. This is also for you if you want to get your message out there, maybe not necessarily through the podcast world, but also through the platforms of speaking on live stages, on summits, on other people's podcasts, in your writing and books. So this is also for you if you're like a little bit scared to get your message out there. And we're going to jam today about how to get courageous, be brave, and share. So before we do that, and before I introduce my amazing new friend, of course you're not new friend, you're my old friend, and probably from many past lives, Corey. Before I go ahead and introduce Corey Poirier, I just want to have you, audience, check in. I want to check in with you and ask you, how's it been going? It's March now of 2022 as we're recording this. It's almost 1 month away from first quarter. How's your business been going for you? And take an honest look. How has it been going with the goals you set for 2022? Are you on track? Are you feeling like you're not quite meeting those goals yet? And if you are feeling called to really dive in deeper, hire a coach, please, I want to let you know that we have a Soul Ascension Business Academy here where I am helping my clients who are leaders, light workers, coaches, spiritualpreneurs, really changing other people's lives. You're impact hungry, and you also want to be unapologetic about making money. So this is about messaging, marketing, magnetizing, and monetizing. And so it'll be in the show notes, but if you are feeling called to see what it's like to work with me and my expert coaches that support my clients, I have an award-winning copywriting coach, a social media expert coach, as well as a clearing coach for my clients in our potent, powerful container where you are really ascending your soul, you're aligning with your CEO soul leadership mindset, embodying it, and then implementing the strategies to get your business to that next level inside and out. So you can apply and you can also DM me for the application link. On Instagram, it's Bold Sexy Warrior. On Facebook, it's Rosalind Fung Coaching, Bold Sexy Warrior. I can't wait to connect. Now let's move into our episode. I want to welcome back Corey. I think this is like your third or fourth time on my show. Hello, Corey. So I know you're not a stranger to many. We just got to really like hang out for a whole, feels like a week, but it's been more like 4 days in total. 3 or 4 days. It's been amazing. Corey is the founder of Blue Talks. If you guys have been following me on social media, you see how I've been traveling to Toronto. I got to MC Blue Talks, which if you're not familiar, you're new to the show. Blue Talks, think about it like if TEDx and Chicken Soup for the Soul had a baby, you would get Blue Talks. Business Life Universe is the acronym. And it's a very incredible community that Corey has built. I love the community. I love the people. The vibe is incredible. So we just did Blue Talks in Toronto, where I was honored to MC and speak, as well as in Edmonton, I got to co-MC and headline. So I feel so honored. Welcome, Corey.
Well, first of all, thank you so much, Rosalind. That was such a generous intro. And yes, thank you for having me here. And yeah, it was amazing to get to spend, like you say, roughly 4 days, if you added them all up, hanging out together. Also, Blue Talks in a lot of ways. Shelly, my girlfriend, calls it like a family business. Uh, I like your description, an army of love. But it's whatever you want to call it. To me, it's a community of people that are like-minded, and there's nothing quite like spending time in that energy and space.
Yeah.
And so, being at the event and speaking at the event is one thing, but I think also being in that space and meeting with like-minded people is another thing altogether. And I was so stoked to have that happen for 4 days. My heart is full. So yes, thank you.
So much fun, so much fun. And so those of you who are just tuning in now, you're like, who is this Corey Poirier? Let me just share a little bit more professionally about Corey. Like I said, this is probably like your third or fourth time on my podcast / TV show. And you guys will see his bio on the show notes and everything. So I just want to speak to from my heart in terms of, Corey is a multi-time TEDx speaker and coach. He coaches others to get on branded stages, including Blue Talks, of course. He is a multi-time international best-selling author. All your Blue Talk series. So people, if you want to get your message out there, like, you need to connect with Corey, because you can get on his stage. And there's books, there's series of books with Blue Talks, co-authored books, and all of them, there are 5 in total right now?
Yeah, so the 6th one is coming out in weeks. Like, I mean, I'd like to say 2 weeks, but we're in that
So exciting, so exciting. And they have all made top bestseller internationally. So I'm in 2 of the books. So that makes me a 3-time best-selling author, because I was one previously with another book called What's Self-Love Got to Do with It. So it's incredible. Just, again, the community, getting your message out there. And we're going to talk more about that today. But Corey's also interviewed over 6,500 top entrepreneurs in the world, including Les Brown. Actually, I've been on a summit because of Corey with Les Brown, which is pretty incredible. Jack Canfield, which I also got the honor to be on the same platform. And he's interviewed Lisa Nichols. And I have seen video footage of Lisa Nichols and Les Brown sharing with Corey, and it was behind the scenes, that Corey is one of the best interviewers they've ever had the pleasure of being interviewed by. That is a huge compliment. Like, I think it's beyond a compliment. I mean, like, that's just like accolades right there. And Corey also started podcasting before podcasting was a thing. So this is why I really want Corey to come on as well to share about, those, because I have been getting clients asking about, how do I start a podcast? Where do we begin? People in my community. So I'm just like, you know what? I know I have one, and I've got a TV show. And the way I go through it is through Times Radio. So that's absolutely one of the ways, as we live stream here, radio and TV through Times, one of the world's top conscious platforms. It's incredible. I'm going to give a shout out to Christopher, who's the producer and founder. He's amazing. But I also want to pick Corey's brain to see what his thoughts are in terms of how to start a podcast. And then, of course, not everybody's thing is podcasting. So how else can we get our message out there in really amazing ways? So, Corey, I'm just going to let you start jamming about podcasting and how you got started.
So, well, thank you so much, Rosalind, and thanks again for that even more professional bio. And I'll say first and foremost, when you mentioned how long I've been doing it now, just to put a number on it for people, I think we're approaching 13 years, maybe 14, in that range. And what made it different, like you said about podcasting versus pre-podcasting, podcasting existed when I started, but it really wasn't a thing. Like, we didn't talk all day about podcasting. Like, it wasn't the growing thing it is now. So much so that I was on a different platform that we actually called online radio. And I'm all about positioning. We'll talk about that probably today. Like, just like you said, you shared the bill with Les Brown, you shared the bill with Jack Canfield. On your bio, you can also say you spoke at Harvard. Well, whenever I started, I actually leveraged the fact that it wasn't podcasting, because podcasting wasn't big. and I talked about how we were on satellite radio. So, in other words, I was able to say to people, we're on online radio and we're in your car dashes through Stitcher satellite radio.
Mm-hmm.
And so, to me, being able to say we're actually a radio show back then was huge, because either you had a radio show on the traditional radio show channels like FM or AM, or you didn't, and you had nothing. It was either that or you had something really small. So, because it wasn't podcasting, I positioned myself as the guy with the online radio show that you can listen to in your cars. Now, having said that, you had to do a few little things to listen to it in your car. It wasn't just as simple as it's on your dash, but
Yeah.
you could legit do it. And so, having said that, positioning is a really big thing to me, and I think the world of podcasting lets us position ourselves like never before. For instance, you could get on 15 podcasts that are newer podcasts. You and I
Mm-hmm.
talked about this in the past, but you could do that in the next 2 weeks, and all of a sudden have those logos from those shows to put on your website as an as seen on banner. And they say that gets you about 70% more credibility. So, you couldn't do that whenever I started, because it would be hard to get on those 9 or 10 or 15 or 20 shows. So I know I'm just kind of at this point, just kind of soft diving in and not really having a specific focus. But yes, I started back in the day when podcasting wasn't a big thing. It was more so online radio. What that allowed me to do is get interviews with a few people that now, if I was starting fresh, I may not have been able to reach, like a Jack Canfield. Jack was
Mm-hmm.
on, I think, our second episode. We didn't even have any listeners whenever we convinced Jack to come on the show. Like, we couldn't even say we have 10 listeners. We couldn't say nothing. Now, I will say one of the things that was good about back then is LinkedIn. You could send one message to your whole LinkedIn network. And so we ended up having about 5,000 listeners on our first episode. So we
Wow.
ended up doing huge numbers. But my point is, when we approached Jack Canfield, we had zero numbers.
Mm-hmm.
And so this was like the old west of having your own show. I mean, that, like I said, I did a little bit of preamble there, but it was like the old west of having your own show. And I believe back then, even, it was all about how you leveraged yourself. So
Yes.
I'm happy, Roz, to talk about podcasting strategy, podcasting leverage, whatever direction you want to go. But that's kind of gives people a little bit of a window. Is I wasn't even in iTunes. I don't even know if iTunes was even a thing. I'm not even sure if it existed.
I don't know how old iTunes is either, but having my show on Home Times Radio as when I started podcasting, I really love it. Like, first of all, it's nice to have that support of Christopher, the producer, and just like putting in my show notes to the team, and then they just blast out everything. So it's like really hands off. All I got to do is show up. And for me, I love live, as you know. I love everything live radio, live TV. It's just so much more fun. I think energetically, it just feels exciting that other people are watching right now, and later on there'll be a replay. So I love that radio is still a thing, and it's an internet radio as well. Was yours, when you first started internet radio, was it like a local radio station?
No, it was a really big platform that still exists today. I
Yeah.
think whenever I was starting with them, I think they had like 4 million listeners a month. So
Mm,
now that's the whole platform, of course. And
yeah.
it is funny how, when, again, all about positioning, right? I know people back then that would say we reach up to 4 million listeners a month. But what they were meaning is the whole network does, which could have
Mhm. Mhm.
3,000 shows, but you believe, if you
We're
hear that,
gonna-
that their
yeah.
show reached
We're not
potentially.
for everybody, so not everybody's going to listen to our
Absolutely.
show.
But it is funny how people would throw that number up, but really maybe they only had 30 listeners a month, right?
Mhm.
And so it's all positioning. But yeah, I was with a really big network. What happened was chiropractic friend of mine, I'll give her a shout out, her name's Dina Churchill from Nova Scotia. She was doing a show on this network, like randomly, like could be once every 3 months, she'd just do a show randomly.
Yeah.
And I was like, I love this. And when she showed me, Chris in the private chat said sounds like a certain station. Chris, can I shout it the name of who it is? I don't want to, I'm on a different network here, so I don't know if that's cool. But yeah, so okay, yeah, so he guessed it, and he was 100% correct. It was Blog Talk Radio, which again
Mm.
still exists, but it was really big back then, really big. And so this Dina Churchill chiropractor, I said, Dina, I'd love to do a show like this. She goes, oh, come over to my office and I'll show you. And she had somebody else helping her with it. So she was just like, here's what it looks like in the back end. Can you figure it out? And so it was really early on. And so I kind of embraced it, dived in. But what I did, which is different, again, like everything I did, I feel is different than now. But I actually hired a producer from day one. So I was
Mhm.
paying a friend of mine, Marco, who and was learning just like I was, but he did a really good job. We had a show that had like 7 guests and like a stand-up comedy break and music break. It was like a variety show.
That's amazing.
It was
Yeah.
wild. We did it every 2 weeks, but it was so much work. But I think if I remember correctly, I might have paid Marco like $1,800 a month back then.
Mhm. Mhm.
And so people might say, well, why would you invest that much in it? But what we were also doing, which was unique, is we had 30 sponsors on day
Mhm.
one before we had any listeners. We had 30 sponsors, each paying around $300 a month.
Ah,
So you can do the quick math. I was able to pay for Marco and have money left over while also building a brand. Now,
yeah.
it was different because how I was able to do that is I had a newspaper previous to that, and I had these advertisers in the paper. Well, I told them, look, I'm not going to do the paper anymore. I'm going over to radio. Do you want to come with me? And some of them just said, we trust you. We'll go with you. So they came over. And so for about 5 years, we had at least 30 sponsors at any given time. And we retained about 80% of the day one sponsors until I decided, hey, we're not going to do this anymore because I want to do just a simple, easy show. And the managing of the sponsorship was just too much work. But
Uh,
interesting to finish that whole story off is that we did that early on, and all the stuff I was doing early on. Whenever John Lee Dumas came around, which he started not
mhm.
long after me with Entrepreneurs on Fire, and John started teaching podcasting to people when
Mm.
podcasting got really big. And what's funny is people that were fans of John and followers of John would say, "Well, Corey, that's not how you're supposed to do it. John Lee Dumas doesn't teach it that way." So I got on an interview with John and I told him, here's what I'm doing. And everybody says I'm not doing it the John Lee Dumas way. And he goes, well, that's good because he said nobody was doing it the John Lee Dumas way when I started. And
Yep.
so he said it's basically you're forging your own path. It's working. Why would you throw that
Mhm.
out just to do what somebody else is doing? So it is kind of interesting is the guy that kind of created the way that everybody thought was the pattern you're supposed to follow told me, look, you're breaking the rules and keep on breaking them.
Yeah, because it was working for you. I mean, at the end of the day, is it working? And I think that's really important. Wow. By the way, I just want to share with the audience as you're listening, we do have sponsorship spots. I know you just said it's a lot of work, but for what it looks like for me, is that you get your own commercial. So you guys know we have a commercial halfway in. You can have your own commercial on my show. And if that's of interest to you, you can always DM me commercial and then we can talk about what that looks like. So just wanted to put that plug in
Yeah,
because I'm always about getting people out there too.
100%. And I should have even clarified because there are sometimes when you say something, it can be even take like it can be almost thought of in that I'm presenting in a different way. But when I say a lot of work, mine was a bit different than what you guys would be doing
Imagine.
sponsorship wise. What
Yeah.
I was doing back then is I was actually basically we would put them on rotating them on different episodes because you can't do 30 sponsors in one episode, but we would then bring them on as a guest, and part of their sponsorship was a feature on the show. And then we actually would go back to them and make sure we were positioning it properly before we aired it, so we had edited then. We
Mm,
would actually put their logos on when I spoke at live events, like, so our sponsorship was like a full package where we were doing stuff almost every week as part of the sponsorship.
amazing.
So that side is when I say it was so much work. It wasn't actually the running of the ad. That part was the easiest part. It was
Mhm.
everything else that went into it.
All
And
the production. Yeah,
yeah,
got
but
it.
it's different, right? That's again, we're going back like whatever that is, 14 or 13 years ago.
Yeah.
That's
Very
easier now.
different. Very different. And so now today with your podcast, is it pre-recorded or is it live? It's not live radio anymore. I believe it's pre-recorded, right?
Yeah, great question. And yeah, let's even dive into the meat of some of the podcasting stuff because I know you've had some people in your network ask about the world of
Mhm.
podcasting. And so yes, we're pre-recorded. Used to be live, but when I said we had like a variety show with all that guests, that wasn't live. You couldn't manage that live. Like what we did was, and
Mm,
that was why it was so much work. We only ran once every 2 weeks, and we would record all these interviews throughout preparing for it. So I was doing hour-long interviews to use like a 10 minutes part for this episode. And
yeah.
so then we couldn't go live. Then, whenever I switched it over to one guest per show, we went live with Blog Talk, and we did see a really big, I guess we'll say, bump in listenership because we were live. But then
Mhm.
eventually, when I decided to make the transition over to iTunes and all the other platforms, I went back to pre-recorded, and I like it much more for me because a lot of times I'll bring on a guest who I'm introducing them to interviewing for the first time ever, and
Yeah.
so with being pre-recorded, there's a take back. Like me, I love being live when I'm being interviewed, and I love the live format. But I do love the idea that we have that for people that are just nervous, and if I said we're live, they would just like lose their stuff. But
Yeah.
then I see them a year later, and they're doing live interviews all the time, so we kind of helped ease them in, if you will. But yeah, we're
Yeah.
pre-recorded.
Well, I always like to say, like, one of my, I guess, gifts in when I'm coaching my clients is I pop a lot of Facebook Live cherries.
Yeah,
Or
and that's what I was
Instagram
trying
Live
to say without
cherries.
saying the words, but you can say the words.
It's my show. I can say
Absolutely.
it. Oh my goodness. And so where, like, I know there's like places like there's apps like Anchor, for example. Do you have any thoughts about that? Like, so just for our listeners, Anchor is a podcast app that you can record things for free. Now, you still need to do your own work on uploading it to all the other podcast platforms like Spotify and Apple iTunes. And I don't know how to do that. That's why I pay Christopher. So I'm a hands-off guy. I'm like, I just show up, I do my thing, and then my team does it. That's the way I like to roll. But some people like to do it themselves, or they might not have the budget to hire people right away. So do you have any thoughts about that, Corey?
Well, and that's the key thing. I think the second part of what you said is probably what happens most of the time is people don't have the budget yet when
Yeah.
they're starting to pay somebody to do it for them or even with them. And here's the catch 22 is that, and we can dive into this. This is a big rabbit hole to go down this area, but about as far as how you actually make it so that your podcast is getting a return, whether that's indirectly or directly, because that's the part everybody struggles with. Lots of people are doing podcasts in their basement, making no money, and then do you spend whatever the number is, $500 or $1,000 a month,
Yes.
have somebody managing it for you if you're not getting any return? So there's one side is how do you actually make a podcast profitable for you? But if we take that off the table for a second, yeah, there's two options. One, you can pay somebody like Om Times or or other platforms where you can do that. Or the other option is do it yourself, which is a little bit tough. When you're doing it yourself, I'll give you the one that I used for the longest time. I've switched since then, but I do actually recommend them all the time. It's called Libsyn, Lybsin. I think I'd have to type it
Okay.
in, or it might be On. But Libsyn. If you type in Ly for Libsyn, you'll find it, even if you spell it a little bit wrong. So Libsyn, what what Libsyn does, which is why it's so beneficial, even if you're doing it yourself, is basically you go on Libsyn and what you have to have is you do your interview, and let's say you turn it into an MP3. Not to get technical anybody, but just MP3 is the format you need to know about. So
Yeah.
let's say you have MP3. What you would do is you go to Libsyn, you type in what you want to show up in your podcast, everything you want to show, and then you upload that episode. So you upload that MP3, and the MP3 has to be done, so polished and done. You upload that in Libsyn. You might type in Roz talks about Akashic Records, and then you might type in a description. And then if you have it set up this way, what it'll automatically do is it'll, once you say submit, then what it'll do is it'll send it out to Spreaker, to iTunes, to Stitcher, to Blog Talk if you want to have it set up that way, and iHeartRadio, Spotify, all the places.
Right.
One thing a lot of people don't know, though, is iTunes, you can't directly go to iTunes and just upload an episode as you go. So with iTunes, it's not an upload source. iTunes actually, you have to create an RSS feed. Again, I don't want to get technical on this because I'm not a technical person.
I'm like, I don't even know what that is.
Yeah, and you don't have to really know. It's just that when you go on Libsyn and you create your episode, it creates this feed that iTunes needs to show your episode. So when you find a Libsyn or whatever else, that's who's sending it to iTunes. You can't go on iTunes and send your episode every time together. I don't think most people know that. So iTunes does is run your episode once it's done and ready. They just say, okay, thank you for the episode. We'll air it now. But they're not doing anything else. And so a Libsyn or a Podbean, I think, is one. Blueberry is another one. Those are basically hosting sites. And you pay, with Libsyn, you pay by how much space you use. So let's say you go on Libsyn, you do an episode every 3 days, let's say. Chances are you'll be under the small category. And so, like, let's say it's $15 a month. So what that does for $15 a month is it allows you to go in, take your MP3, upload the episodes, and send them out to all the places that they have to go. So like Home Times is doing for you, that's how you would do it if you're doing it on your own. But the key thing there is you still have to create the MP3 on your own. You still have to edit it. You have to polish it, all that stuff. And you don't want to do that.
Oh my God, no. Like, personally, no. Some people love to do it. Or again, that might just not be in their budget. So yeah. Thank you so much for that. We're getting some really awesome comments here on the live stream. Hello, I want to give out a shout to Karen, Michelle, Katrina, hi loves. They're all part of our communities, Blue Talk communities. So great to see you all here. And thank you for your comments. They're saying this is timely as well. And I also want to say, like, for me, I like easy. So that's why it's just like, I want to stay in my zone of genius, show up, do the thing, and then have team to support me. Now, and again, we talks about, like, what if you're just starting out and you don't have the budget? So then these are ways in how Corey's sharing that can be feasible for you. But I'm also like, are you doing the things that are income producing? Right? Like, it might be worth hiring team to support you while you stay in your zone of genius and you're calling more clients in and delivering your goods. So you do have to weigh out the pros and cons with this. But I also really love, I just think doing like a Zoom interview like this, and then zooming into your, let's say, Facebook page, and then taking that recording and then put it on your YouTube channel. So what happens after this live stream is my team puts it together and then edits it a little bit in terms of like putting out. Well, actually, they don't need to do too much other than just upload it, because Christopher does everything, actually. So I just say, yay, I've got many different team members, but it gets hosted on my YouTube channel, also gets hosted on OwnTime's YouTube channel as well. So there's multiple platforms, and then also still pulled the audio, and it's on my podcast, on the podcast platforms as well. So yeah, I think video is personally the way to go. I personally love video way more than just audio. That's a preference, and that's why I shifted from radio to TV. So do you have any other thoughts before we move into commercial about what we're jamming up?
Yeah. So I guess one thing I would add to that too, Roz, and maybe we can talk. I mean, I don't know how deep we want to go into podcasting, but I'm happy to tell people how they can actually leverage podcasting so it makes sense to do this. Because one key thing you said is, I'd rather focus on income producing things. The podcast thing can be that for you, but I think it has to be that for you if you're going to use your budget to pay for it. So in other words, don't use your budget to pay. Maybe you don't even need to be doing a podcast if it's not going to be, if you don't know how to get it to earn a revenue eventually for you. So I think you have to figure out what direction to go there. But what I will say, one of the things people struggle with as well is, how do I keep creating so much content to feed the beast? And I'll just give people a strategy. Brendan Burchard, I always loved this strategy. I've used it off and on throughout the years. What Brendan Burchard does. So here's a guy that's known as the content king.
Love him.
Brendan, what he does is at the start of every week, he records a 1-hour video interview with his team in his studio, and then he leaves. See you guys. You have the content for the week now. And what they do with that is they chop it up into mini clips. They put it out as the full clip, chop it up into mini clips. They take pictures from it and make that an image quote, and they take things he said there. And like he might have said, like I say, you hear me say it all the time, doesn't matter where you start, it's what you do next. So they might take a quote like that he said and post that with an image on Facebook or on Instagram. And so what they're doing is they repurpose that 1 hour he gave them at the start of the week to create his entire content for the whole week. So all
that's
he had to
so
do is
powerful.
dedicate 1 hour and have a team, and then he has content for the entire week when everybody else is struggling to create content 3 and 4 times a day and spending that time and not able to focus on income producing activities. So they're actually losing money because they don't have some sort of structure to repurpose this stuff. So
I really love that strategy. Actually, that's a good reminder for myself included, because that's something I recommend with my team. I'm like, sometimes I'm very spontaneous. So if I get the download, I'm like, I'm just showing up right now and I'm just going to riff and channel whatever needs to come through. And then I'll send it to my marketing team. I want to give them a shout out, Empathy Marketing. And they will then slice and dice and repurpose into little clips too. So that's a phenomenal strategy and super easy. Beautiful. So what we're going to do is take a commercial break. I would love to hear, if you're watching live, what your takeaways are so far. If you're on the replay and just tuning in, just see where you're at with things in terms of getting your message out there and thinking about like what's really been helpful so far. Thanks, Corey. We'll come back soon.
OwnTimes TV. Imagine becoming a super influencer. Reinvent yourself, invest in your brand, and then manifest your success with a robust spheric approach. OwnTimes Media and Broadcasting offers a unique and multifaceted way to become the spiritual and conscious influencer you deserve to be by putting your message across our powerful platform with its proven record of integrity and excellence. Through our produced shows, Ohm Times offers the opportunity to become a social media TV personality, a radio show host, an Ohm Times magazine columnist, and a syndicated podcaster, all in one shot. By live streaming your show on Ohm Times TV and broadcasting it across the extensive Ohm Times radio and TV networks, you become more than a host. You become an ambassador and a force for positive change. Ohm Times. Open yourself to the possibilities.
Are you feeling maxed out working one-on-one with clients and you're deeply desiring to scale your business for more time freedom without sacrificing your income, but rather expanding it? Many of my clients who are light workers, healers, practitioners, and even coaches, they're often multi-modality, are coming to me because they are sick and tired of working with clients on a one-off session model where the clients are coming in on an as-need basis. Or if they're selling packages, they are selling them in the sense of buy 5, get 1 free, or the greater the number of sessions, the greater the discount. The problem with this is it's still a dollar for hours business model. And so that leaves the practitioner feeling really exhausted and overwhelmed from having to put so much time, effort, and energy in finding new clients that they're not operating in their most elevated self with their current clients. And so if this is you, I would love to share with you that it's time to elevate your business and scale it to sell high ticket one-on-one programs or even group programs. This will allow you to have more deeper impacts because you're raising your clients' results, you're scaling your business, and you're having that time freedom you deeply are yearning for. If this is resonating with you, love, I'd love to invite you to come on a soul business alignment call with me so that you can stop feeling like you're on this roller coaster ride and start to feel safe and stable and even having fun in your business and your finances. Please go to electrifymybusiness.com to apply and we'll hop on a call. I can't wait to connect.
If I could be you and you could be me for just 1 hour, if we could find a way to get inside each other's minds, walk a mile in my shoes, walk a mile in my shoes. Well, before you abuse, criticize and accuse, walk a mile in my shoes.
Hello, welcome back, loves. So Corey and I are in our private chat here on the live stream, and you were just sharing that the first podcast ever was back in 2004, and your own podcast itself was 12 years ago.
Yeah, so that means podcasting is less than 20 years old. That's the takeaway from that. And yeah, so I feel like I definitely was in the early phases.
So in this part of our last half of our show here, we want to jump a little bit more on how to find it, like actually create income with your podcast. Corey will jam more about that. And then we'll talk a little bit more about, for those of you who are feeling the call to get your message out there, but perhaps you're feeling a little shy to share your story, or maybe you're not shy to speaking, but there's a story you feel called to share, and perhaps it's feeling scary to share this part of you or this part of your story. So we'll jam about that. And then also the power of speaking on stages, on summits, writing your story. We're going to speak about that as well. So Corey, let's talk a little bit about leveraging podcasts financially. What are some of the things we need to know?
Well, I'll skip over and leave out the sponsor side because we talked about that, and I think that's the one that everybody understands. But
Yeah.
what a lot of people don't know about the sponsor side is you have to have a tremendous amount of listeners. Like you have to have a really
Mm.
solid size show for people to say, "Here's my wallet, take my money to put me in front of your audience." And so that's a long path. John Lee Dumas, who I mentioned earlier, I don't know what he charges now per spot, but it's right on his website. One of the things
Mhm.
I love about John is when you go on eofire.com, he lists his entire income for every month and how he made every penny.
Wow.
So one of the things he used to say, now I have no clue what it is now, but I think his podcast sponsor spots used to be like $300 a spot, I believe, if I remember correctly. Meaning, like if Google wanted to be on Entrepreneurs and Fire, they would pay $300 every time their ad aired, a 30-second ad. And that might sound great when you're thinking 30 seconds, but this is a guy who had one of the biggest non-fame shows in the world. So if they're paying 300 to be in his show and you only have 100 listeners an episode, chances are you're not going to get a whole lot of sponsor money. So I want to say sponsorship, Roz, to me, that's one of those things. Either A, maybe you're like me where you already have worked with clients who you would want to become a sponsor, or somebody like yourself who has a community. But if you're starting from scratch and don't have that, having sponsors means getting a lot of listeners. So what you need to do there is you need to have an amazing show. You need to have a show that's dialed in. And so I would say focus on that being one of those things that hopefully it comes to you after a while. So let's
Mhm.
talk about how you can make money on podcasting if you're starting from scratch. And so, really, at the end of the day, and this is the hard part for people to understand, I'll tell you the first way, which is the way that I can't even calculate how much revenue I've made from podcasting, but it's substantial. Indirectly, ignore the sponsorship money for all those years. Indirectly, because of being able to, for example, what you talked about earlier, leverage the fact that I've interviewed Les Brown or Bob Proctor or Jack Canfield, the late Bob Proctor, interviewed these icons, and now I have, because of that, photos with them and comments by them about my work. So there's testimonials from them. Now people listen to an episode and see me as an expert because I'm sitting there interviewing Les Brown, and so. But then, I mean, that's one thing. So that's credibility you get. But what do you do with that? So as a speaker, Roz, whenever people read my bio, they say some form of, and he's interviewed the likes of, and start listing the names I've interviewed in my podcast. Well, there's that one little thing. People pay more to have me speak because of that. They actually
Yes.
go, okay, well, indirectly by saying this in his bio and in our marketing, we're almost saying, in their mind, they're almost saying we have Les Brown and Jack Canfield and stuff with us here today because we're getting the knowledge from Corey that he culled from their minds. And so it's the credibility that I've been able to monetize for speaking gigs, for coaching clients. I've had people that were thinking about coming with Blue Talks, doing stuff with us, and then they would see me post a picture of, say, Lisa Nichols with a quote by Lisa, and they'll go, "Oh my God, I love Lisa Nichols. I can't believe you interviewed her." And then an hour later, they'll reach out and say, "Okay, I'm going to go ahead with this." But what happened in between there? Meaning there was a psychological thing that happened, I believe, because they're like associating me with those thought leaders and went, okay, you know what? If they trusted them, I can trust them too. I'm going to sign up.
Mhm.
And then, like, for example, I can tell you one client, Tasia Valenza,
Yes.
who's an Emmy Award winning voiceover artist. Tasia signed up for our TEDx program. Well, how that happened is I was doing interviews in LA for our show and reached out to Tasia about doing an interview with her. We got together and hung out. And she said, "Oh my gosh, I love all the people you're interviewing," and et cetera, et cetera. And then she moved forward. Well, that doesn't happen without the podcast. So
Mhm.
that's the indirect way to monetize your podcast, which is basically you're leveraging the stuff that happens because of the podcast on your bio, on the places where people see you. That's one thing.
And that's
Second,
how I've been doing it as well, right? With being able to speak at Harvard, thank you, Blue Talks, and being on I also spoke for Fearless One, they're called One Women. So Fearless Women Summit, This Woman Means Business. Even that itself feels very substantial. And then also sharing the bill with Les Brown and Jack Canfield is really huge. So it does position. And for me, just so the audience knows, my show has supported people in coming in, building that like, know, and trust factor before hiring me. So it is really amazing to have a show and give lots of value, and then have people, feel like, oh yeah, like I love the energy, the frequency that Roz is putting out, aligns with my soul. So it really is helpful for that.
Yeah, and I was just gonna say too on that one too, Roz, is I'll double that and say, on top of them maybe listening in like they are now and saying, oh, Roz really has a lot of experience, or look at the guest Roz brought on. That's one thing. Then there's the second part is you're working with potential clients and you can say, oh, check out this clip I did on that with so and so, and
That's
all of
right.
a sudden they're thinking of hiring you, and that clip is what pushes them over the edge. So this is all indirect. But if you're okay, I'll tell you a direct story. You might want to.
Absolutely.
Did you want to add something there first before I go over to the other side?
Yes, you read my face, right?
Yeah, okay. Absolutely.
Yeah, the other really cool thing is because I, first of all, love learning. So I love bringing on guests for my own personal learning. And I want to have people like really share their wisdom and knowledge out there. So those of you who are watching and you feel called to be a guest on my show, please let me know. You can apply and we can see if there's alignment there. But what's really cool is the communities come together of the guests are listening, and it's beautiful because again, if they've been following me and then they're like, ooh, the guest could have been another person's teacher, and all of a sudden they feel called to potentially work with me. So it's just so beautiful in this co-creation and collaboration.
100%. Yeah, I think it's unlimited the amount of ways you can leverage the show as far as that goes. And then I'll add too, I talked earlier that as seen on banner, which will increase the fees that you can charge, even if you're a coaching client. Well, and then I'll go to the direct side, but another indirect one is that being a podcast host or being a host of a show, you can now go to Roz, you can go to somebody and say, hey, I'd love to be on your show. I feel good synergy. I listen all the time. And I'd love to bring you on my show and do a podcast swap. But what that does is you could get on realistically in a week or 2 weeks if you did reach outs and for maybe a half hour a day, you could probably get on 20 shows. Well, then again, if you've never had an As Seen on banner, just having a podcast now allows you to get on those shows and you can have that on your site. If you don't have that stuff, you can use your own clips. And like you said, it gains that credibility. So that's all indirect, because what it does is it's building your credibility up in the way that in the past traditional media could only do. You would have had to go in traditional media. Now you can create this stuff on your own. But there's a more direct way that I know certain people have done it. To me, this has happened as happy accidents a lot, but you could actually, for lack of a better way of saying it, you could structure it this way. So I know a few people that what they do is they figure out who in the business world will be an ideal client for them, and then they reach out and have them on their show.
Yes, that's right. Interview your ideal clients.
Yeah, and what happens is either you could do a case study on them, so it's giving them exposure and stuff. But what happens, ultimately what they're doing is they're actually hoping that person will say, you know what, I should hire you. Like, so they're actually, basically they're by bringing them onto their show, they're actually being interviewed to be their consultant or coach. Like, I know somebody that he built his entire 7-figure business solely by bringing on his ideal clients on his podcast, giving them exposure, and then having either the ideal client say, I need to work with you, or them saying, hey, you're on the show. I learned a few ways I can help you. Do you mind if I send some tips? And then they end up working together. For me, that's happened organically a lot, where I bring somebody on, we get talking about speaking. They're like, you know what I'd love to do is a TEDx talk. I watched yours, and this is in real time on the interview. I watched your TEDx, and I'd love to do that, and et cetera, et cetera. Can you help me do that? And it turns into like them actually saying, can I work with you? Or a lot of people wouldn't see it, but it's after the show. People come on and say, I want to get into speaking more, Corey. I know you have a program. Let's chat. So that's a more direct way. Again, for me, I haven't really, that's been a happy accident a lot, but there's people that do that. So there's 3 ways just for people to know how to monetize a show. 1, you can go after sponsors. 2, you can indirectly build your credibility and boost it up in front of your ideal clients that go, well, I need to hire her. Or again, use those clips and send them to clients that are thinking of hiring you. And then the 3rd is directly say, okay, I'm going to bring my ideal clients to the show. And then that way they might hire me, or people listening will now understand who my ideal client is by listening to me interviewing my ideal client.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and then also a strategy that people have done, and I haven't done it myself, and now I'm like, gotta do it. But I do this on my Facebook lives, is client testimonials, like client interviews, so that of course people who are watching are like, oh, I'm a mirror of this client. Like, I am where they used to be before working with Rosalind, and look at where they are now. So it instills that hope. So and I like those happy accidents, by the way. One time I was being interviewed on somebody's show, and then they called me right away after the show. They're like, can I hire you? I'm like, what? I was like, yeah, let's talk. talk, right? So, and she was one of my favorite clients. So, so much fun.
We have some
Thank you for
questions too.
sharing all of this. We do have a few questions actually. Like, I love that we have some people asking questions live. So I'm just gonna scroll back. Let me just see. So Michelle says, what did your podcast startup process look like, Corey, in terms of planning it out? Did you use a spider method here? So Corey teaches something which we're not going to go into detail today, but there's something called the spider method, which helps you look at how to plan your talks and your topics and things like that. So let's answer that question.
Absolutely. And excuse me, I see, if you're okay with it, Roz, I see Michelle has a second question. Maybe I'll answer them both at once. Is that cool?
Oh, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
Question?
Yeah. So the second question is just, do you need permission to put these logos on your website or banner that I mentioned? So what my process looked like at the start is I did use the spider method. So since Michelle knows what it is, she'll understand how I used it perhaps. Like we said, we don't have time to go into what it is, but I did use it, certainly. I also used it in terms of mapping out my marketing plan of what shows I want to go on to help, because that's another thing. We don't have time to go into how to promote your show probably, but I went on to other shows to promote my shows. Most podcasters love saying, oh, and what's your show called again? And talking about your show at the start. So I even used the spider method for deciding where I wanted to go and talk about my show. But as far as also what it looked like at the start, we did plan it out. As I mentioned, I was working with a producer. So Marco and I would actually say, okay, who do we want on the show? I'll reach out and do the interviews. And then we would have a spreadsheet. And I would literally say, okay, Marco, take this part and use that clip in between there. So it was very, very formal at the time when I first started, Michelle. And then as far as the, like we talked about, if I did the interview, then I would just send Marco the MP3 clip. Then we started using Libsyn, and I told you how that process worked. So it was very formal. The one other thing that I did early on that I would never do in a million years now is I actually came in with the same 15 questions or 10 or 12 questions. I made sure they were really deep questions. Like they weren't just like, hey, how many years have you been in business? Like they were deep. Like, what do you want your legacy to be, and how are you making sure it's going to happen? Like they were deep questions. But Michelle, I did have a standard list of questions when I started because I was nervous about just freeforming it. But once I got comfortable with freeforming, maybe a year and a half in, the questions went out the window, and I think I've maybe used them on 2 interviews because I was forced to since. So when I first started, I did have a list of questions. I did have spreadsheets we used to map out who was going to be on each show. We did, like I say, use Blog Talk Radio at the time. So we uploaded the show with MP3s. I mean, yeah, it was very formal. Today, it's very informal.
I love what you just shared. Actually, I want to point that out as a strategy for people who are scared to share their message is, like, what are the questions that people often ask you that would be valuable to share, and then plot that out. So like you were even saying, you were more of the host, so you had standard structure in terms of the questions. I'm kind of laughing. I'm like, you did. Just knowing you now, I'm like, oh, yeah. That's so good to know that's where you came from. And that, as you got more confident, that's not really a thing. And actually, when I think back to when I first started 2 years ago, I was also very like, oh, I gotta say this, and I wrote down everything if it was a solo episode. And I'm like, now I'm just like, yeah, let me just channel this. And I'll make sure I hit these. Like it's, yeah. So,
well, so I'll also, again, just to, if you're okay with it, just to build on what you just said there as well. There's something that I've, years ago, a guy named Mike Koenigs did, which I love, which is he talks about you should write down to answer. Now he was talking it in a different context. He was talking about create 20 videos, 10 of them should be your frequently asked questions. So you actually say, here's what I get asked all the time, and you do 10 separate videos answering a different question. But here's the interesting part, what you can also do, Roz, and this is next level for people. This is a hack that's one step above, is then do your should ask questions. So these are SAQs. What should you be asking me? So people always ask me, how do you get paid to speak? But what they really should be asking me is this. And so what you do now is you ask the questions of what people should ask you and you wish they did ask. And that's going next level, because you might get the same question all the time, but you might not get the question that everybody should be asking that they don't know to ask. So anyway,
that's very powerful. Oh my gosh. And of course you're going to be back on my show. So we'll have to talk about, how to promote your show next time you're back. But let's talk in the next few minutes here about, maybe again, podcasting isn't a thing, but like one way to promote your business is get on other people's podcasts. And then, of course, Corey, I want to celebrate you and Blue Talks and birthing this baby out into the world. Like, it's been incredible watching you come up with this idea, birth it, and then like what it's come to be now. 5 books, it's almost 6, all bestsellers. Branded talks across North America. Just, I'm so proud of you, and I'm so proud to be part of this community. I mean, it's so beautiful to see some of our beautiful members here, a part of Blue Talks. I say it like it's part of my baby.
Well, it is in some ways, I think.
Or it's not. But I feel like I'm so like part of it because I've been part of this journey. And it really is near and dear to my own heart, just watching you, witnessing you, and we've become really good friends over the last, oh my gosh, how long have we known each other? 5 years now? So it's been incredible. I mean, Corey's probably one of my business besties for sure. We jam about things behind the scene, support each other. So then in terms of, I really want to promote Blue Talks here. You guys, if you can see how much I love it, because the community, because it's getting your message out there. You're allowed to speak about spirituality, unlike TEDx. That's a little bit no. This is why Blue Talks got birthed into the world. How can people get connected with you in terms of getting, how do they know if this is for them?
I mean, that's a really good question, and that's a should ask question, Ross. What I just talked about a minute ago. That's a should ask question versus one I get asked. So, the question I get asked all the time is, how do I learn more? How do I speak on a Blue Talk stage? Mm-hmm. Which, between you and I and everybody listening, I'm just now discussing with Toronto universities about going back to Toronto in the fall as well. And so one thing is people should ask is, how do I know if I'm a good fit? Because how do you get involved? Really, at the end of the day, this is changing because we want to get me fired, as you heard me talk about this past couple weeks. I want to be the DJ only, not the person that you have to come to for everything. But so as far as how do you learn more for now, and as we change that, you just reach out to me and say, hey, am I a good fit? And let's talk about it. But in terms of how do you know if you're a good fit? First of all, people ask me, how do you vet me to make sure I'm a good fit on your stage whenever, let's say, Rosalind sends them my way? Well, first I would say, if Rosalind sends you my way and says, Corey, you got to meet my good friend so-and-so, then you're a good fit. So people ask me about vetting. Well, I don't vet, and this is going to sound strange, I don't vet people when they're referred to me by other Blue Talks people. So my thing is like attracts likes. And by the way, out of almost 400 people, that has not failed us yet once. So first of all, if you are aligned with all the people that you're seeing as part of Blue Talks, if you look on your mutual friends list on Facebook and you have 25 people that are a part of Blue Talks, then chances are it is for you. But in terms of how do you know that, let's say you're just discovering it for the first time today and you don't know anybody that's a part of the Blue Talks, I would say this, you summarized it really good at the first. Blue Talks is really like TEDx and Chicken Soup meet each other. But what I would say is the BLU stands for Business Life Universe. And so what we're trying to do is we're trying to merge those 3 things. So we might have somebody on our stage talk about their life story, somebody might share a business message, and somebody might share a story about synchronicity. And so I would say, if you're heart-based, if you're somebody who loves to help create impact, if you're somebody who has this life story that is inspiring other people, because when you ask people, share your story or talk with it to other people, they get goosebumps or they start crying, then chances are you're a good fit. So I would say, really, if you're heart-based, and you don't have to be spiritual, but if you're heart-based, you're spiritual, you're a solopreneur, chances are those are some of the ingredients of a good Blue Talks speaker.
Yeah, beautiful. And then we see Anne Miles here. Hello. Anne's like, I'm obsessed with this community. Yes. And Blue Talks is so incredible, and as well as all the other offerings. Corey just had a 3-day speakers boot camp where I had the honor to speak, as well as be one of the coaches that people could book in laser coaching calls with. And that was so much fun. And that's happening again in October. And tickets are on sale right now as well, right, Corey?
Yeah, $97 Canadian. And only. And we're doing a 2-for-1 right now. We had stalled it, but I decided to put it back in place because we announced that Ken Honda is going to be joining us again. And because he was the new speaker at it, I want to do the 2-for-1. What I will say, Roz, to that point, this circles all back. I like when things circle back. So this is a callback to earlier. The other side is when we talk about how do you leverage or monetize your podcast, well, that boot camp. You know, so now the next one coming up, we're bringing on James Redfield, who wrote The Celestine Prophecy, Ken Honda, who's a Mind Valley instructor, and everybody loves Ken. Those two people, they don't get on my show without my podcast. So that's just a full circle. They are in my network because of the podcast as well. So it just keeps on giving.
Powerful, beautiful. And so in this last minute, those of you, again, it's in the show notes, but Corey is COREYPOIRIER on Facebook, on Instagram, it's That Speaker Guy. And your website is thatspeakerguy.com. So you guys can go check Corey out. Thank you so much, Corey. I'm just going to leave this with a light language. So I'm going to invite everyone just to breathe in. And just activating your power to speak your message out there in the world. Expanding, expanding, expanding. Breathing in and out. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you so much, my loves, for being here. Do share this episode. I love Blue Talks community. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Please share this on Facebook. Please share this on Instagram. We really appreciate you all. And thank you so much, Corey, for being here. Love you.
My pleasure, my friend. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.